Hey everybody, it's Tatiana with Back to Facts. I just wanted to jump on here real quick and talk about the latest news for Sunday, April 11th. It's kind of a doozy. We see that Minneapolis is erupting now in rioting and looting because of the shooting death of 20-year-old Dauntewhite. He was a father of a 1-year-old baby. This happened in Plymouth, a suburb of Minneapolis, and the rioting and looting is going on in Brooklyn Center, also an area of Minneapolis. This is a really good example of the Spinofomission that happens not only with mainstream journalists, corporate media, but also just bystanders or citizen journalists. You often don't get the whole picture. And especially with things like this that prompt so much anger and so much raw emotion, often before all the facts are in. Even if the facts are irrefutable or there's a lot of visual evidence, there still can be other facts that are important to note. For instance, police tried to arrest him because he had an outstanding warrant. None of the reports said what the outstanding warrant was for. And so that's a lot different than somebody just being arrested, being stopped for having too many air fresheners, and then somehow getting arrested. I guess apparently he tried to drive away, and all it said is that an officer shot him. Personally, I don't think that driving away is enough cause to shoot anyone. I've read about a lot of circumstances like that. There was a white young man earlier, like in April, about a year ago, April of 2020, and he was suspected of drug dealing, and he tried to flee and he got shot in the back. This was like way out in some remote area, but all of the shootings by police are maintained in the Washington Post database. They've been maintaining them since 2015, so you can look at unarmed, armed, history of mental illness, and it's very detailed. And while raw numbers, white people actually get shot by police, more white people get shot by police every year than black people. So the point in looking at the statistics of police shootings is not that more black people are shot by police, which is kind of what the impression is. For all of us, we feel like it's almost only black people, and it's because it's for one reason, and that's race. So if you leave facts out, you're going to get really skewed impressions on both extremes. And I don't really see any attempt to kind of bring people together at all when these things are happening. It seems like news spreads like wildfire, and then there's just massive riots and looting. And then we're just so overcome with emotion and accusations of racism on both sides that we can't even come up with solutions. That was so weird. So the reason why it feels like more black Americans and people of color are shot by police is that they are a much smaller percentage of the population. The black population in America is between 12 and 13% of the whole population. And something like, of all the people who get shot by police every year, it's about double that percentage. So it's about 24 to 26% of people shot by police are black people. Now, the other races have fewer percentage of people shot. White people are still have the most shot, unarmed, armed, whatever, in the course of a year by police. But again, it's not as much of a percentage as they are of the general population. So that just means that black people are more likely to be shot by police. And so when we don't have complete reports, we think, well, why would they arrest somebody? Why would they chase after someone that they were arresting just because they started, resisting arrest, or, it always feels like there was no reason to do what they did, which I still think there may have been an overreaction just simply because he was fleeing. But when you really get familiar with a lot of these same events, you really start to see patterns, and you just get like a clearer picture of the entire issue. A little bit more than 1,000 people total are shot by police every year. And then the unarmed amount is less. And so it's actually a very rare event. And it just does seem really odd how the headlines always say, when it's a black American, they always say that a black man was shot by police. But when a white person is shot by police, they just don't say their race, which is really what traditional journalism says, is you don't mention the race in any story, especially crime stories, unless you're doing a description for someone who's wanted, or unless their race or their appearance was directly relevant to the case and the situation. But that's all gone out the window. And it's, again, like I've said this before, it's not that I think white people are persecuted. Now it's really, I am very afraid for our country. And I think that more often than not, when you do talk to people, you realize that they're actually more reasonable than you thought. But it was that their argument got stretched. Their argument got stretched and distorted. And even if they do say shocking things, maybe we should just be like, can you explain that to me? Can you clarify? And have you seen this happening? And, this and that. And then you'll realize, oh, okay, what I was calling a white supremacist is just someone who it could be someone who has studied the Constitution. I mean, it's not that like those people don't exist. It could be someone who has really studied the Constitution, and they see that if you don't apply the law equally to everyone, then it can backfire. And then it can go ahead and backfire on the future dominant group or whatever it is, which means that our brains are not striving for equal application under the law. Our brains are striving for not to get canceled or called out for being racist, just not to lose out because they didn't express themselves enough about how much they want to compensate for the sins of the past. And perhaps there is a way to figure out how to compensate for the real free labor that was given for decades to build much of the South and to run the engines of the economy in Britain with the cotton trade. So perhaps there is a way to figure out how to actually directly help those who suffered or whose ancestors suffered, and therefore they suffered and have suffered in poverty much more and much longer than many of us who are not Black know of in our lives. So what I'm trying to say is, you can talk about compensating for something as a state. You can talk about racism, that it's a problem, okay? And it is. It manifests itself in fear of the other, fear of the unknown. But there's also now a fear of being perceived as racist just because you happen to perhaps have had some bad experiences with some members of the race, and then you need to be reminded that it's behavior, but you still get triggered, and on and on. And so if we're going to be so worried about racism without really delving into our relationships with our fellow Americans of a different color, of the same color, then we are going to be forever overcompensating for perhaps a subconscious feeling of lack in our own consciousness. And therefore, we're always kind of trying to cover up this feeling of lack instead of realizing that many, many, many Americans really do hold dear the values of freedom and equality and equal protection under the law. And we've really been done a disservice with all the talking points, like, Republicans don't care about you, they don't care about the working poor. All they care about is morality, and they hate gay people, and now they're chasing trans people. When really, believe it or not, it's not just guns, God, and religion that they cling to, like Barack Obama said in 2008 when he was campaigning for president. It's that they're a full spectrum, just like the left. And there's a lot of common ground, actually, with those on the right and some people on the left. I feel that the parties are eventually going to go away. But we might not have that opportunity as long as we feel extremely triggered by a certain set of events, but not aware of the big picture, not aware of the macro and the implications. For instance, when a conservative says, well, Black Lives Matter, what about Chicago? You know, that just became like this non sequitur for the left, because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, that's racist. You're saying black on black crime is like a much bigger problem than police shootings. Well, you know, that's racist, which I used to think. But after getting to know a lot of people who talk about the violence in Chicago and the certain neighborhoods, and you know, the constant gang shootings, which are very real. It's just they're down to the block level, not like you can't look at a ward and say, oh, well, you would see that violent crime is down, or shooting deaths or gang shootings are down. But that part of that is because the hospitals have gotten better at saving people who've been shot. I kid you not. Anyway, I've talked to enough people who mention crime, illegal weapons, and gun running and drug running and all that in places where you and I probably never, ever go. Maybe I have once, few times, you know, but very rarely. So the brain of the conservative thinks, well, if you're talking about police shootings, then statistically that's very, very rare compared with the violence we're seeing in the inner cities, and we need to do something about it. All I heard was, I was thinking that people who made this argument were thinking that Black Americans were inherently more violent, which is something that I think racists all throughout our history have tried to perpetuate, but which I emphatically deny. I emphatically reject anything like that there's a more violent tendency in either blacks or whites, not to mention the whole full spectrum of brown, yellow, and red people. It really makes me sad when we have very, very limited information, and then already we're seeing just a really huge emotional reaction, collective emotional reaction, when what we really need to do is understand how some people think mathematically, some people think statistically, some people think logically. They go, well, if this is the case, then this should be the case. And it bothers them, their brain, that it's apparently not. While others are watching them and thinking, like, you're privileged, or, you know, you don't care about anybody else but yourself. And that's just because you're a white male. And, you know, instead of thinking, oh, geez, maybe this person really thrives on math, you know, thrives on order and logic. You know, there's a lot more to life than simply race or your physical genes. So with that, I just say, please be mindful of the Spinofomission. And the only situation where I think less is more is not true is with information. But it has to be gathered. Information has to be gathered in a certain way where you're filling in a picture. And that means you really have to examine your own biases, because everyone takes in information almost instantly filtered by their own bias. So there are techniques for that, but I just wanted to jump on because it's been a while, and I wanted y'all to just go with me through the whole police shooting situation. I just want to say I'm so sorry for Dauntewhite's parents, his girlfriend, the mother of his baby. I don't think they're the same, because the girlfriend went to the hospital with minor injuries. And the whole story of what happened. I hope we can see the video. I hope we can really try to understand each other and to heal, rather than fan the flames of misunderstanding and division. All right, thanks a lot. Take care. Till next time.